Call this meeting of the City of West Hollywood Rent Stabilization Commission to order Thursday, January 23rd, 2020. If you'll rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Here.
Commissioner Kirkes? Absent. Commissioner Maggio?
Here.
Commissioner Martz?
Present.
Commissioner Charity?
Here.
Vice Chair Topshian? Absent. Chair Bergstein?
Present. We have a quorum. Sending healing thoughts to Vice Chair Topshian, I think a little under the weather, and I see Commissioner Kirkes is on his way, will be joining us. Moving on to item 4, the approval of the agenda. Do we have any additions or changes we'd like to make to the agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept.
I'll make a motion. I'll second that.
We have a roll call, please.
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio?
Aye.
Commissioner Martz?
Aye.
Commissioner Charity?
Aye.
Vice Chair Topshian absent. Chair Bergstein?
Aye. Passes. Moving on from item 4 to item 5, approval of the minutes from the January 9th, 2020 meeting. Does anyone have any comments or corrections or changes?
Did we get an email with some changes?
Can you speak into your microphone, please?
Did we get an email with some changes on minutes?
It was minor, just that my name had been misspelled in one paragraph, and that's been corrected.
All right.
Very minor.
Well, then I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting, which was
January 9th.
January 9th.
And I'll second that.
Have a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Aye.
Commissioner Kirkes absent. Commissioner Maggio?
Yes.
Commissioner Martz?
Aye.
Commissioner Charity?
Aye.
Vice Chair Topshian absent. Chair Bergstein?
Aye. It passes. Moving on from item 5 to item 6. I don't have any speaker slips. Do we have any over there? Okay. On to item 7, manager's report. Mr. Newton.
Good evening. Review of the look-ahead calendar. We do have 2 appeals this evening. Looking at the February 13th and the February 27th meetings, 1 appeal is scheduled on both of those nights. On the February 13th meeting, we will be bringing an item. It's on relocation fees. There's some amendments that we took to the council, and the chair did ask if we could bring those to the commission prior to the council taking action on them. So staff did ask the item to be tabled, and so that will be for your review and comment on the 13th. The broken elevator discussion, we will go ahead and move that to the 27th so that we have 1 appeal and 1 item on both of those nights. Looking down the look-ahead calendar to the March 26th and the April 9th meetings, on your agenda this evening, there is a discussion of either canceling the 26th meeting or holding it elsewhere. I did notice that council chambers will be unavailable for those 2 meetings, April 9th and March 26th. However, when we get to that discussion item, we can talk about options that the commission has to hold special meetings at Fiesta Hall. That concludes my report.
Any questions for the manager at this point? No? Moving on to item 8, commission comments.
I have one. City Hall, City Council, and City staff will be holding a pop-up at the West Hollywood Park and Dog Park. It's this Saturday, January 25th, from 10 to 1. It's just a very informal meet and greet. Meet your City Council and City staff and ask questions and get answers to anything you have. They'll have breakfast, burritos, and coffee, so everyone is welcome.
Right up here at the park, you said? At the dog park?
Yes.
Correct.
Anyone else? I have one, and this is a little difficult for me. I'd like to propose an adjournment motion in memory of Los Angeles Sheriff's Department Detective Amber Least. Amber was a 12-year veteran of the department, 5 years with the City of West Hollywood's station. had a particularly good relationship with Amber. We shared kind of a Jewish sensibility, is the best that I can put it. Her relationship with her parents reminded me very much of my relationship with my parents. And there is a central tenet to Judaism called Tikkun Olam, which translates to heal the world. And that is what she did every single day on the job. And that is how she died. For those of you who have not heard the story, she was off duty in her car, stopped at a red light. There was an elderly couple in the crosswalk. The woman fell in front of her car. They could not get her up. Amber got out of her car, helped her up, got them across the street to the bus stop, and when she went to return to her own vehicle, the light had changed, and an oncoming vehicle tragically struck and killed her. Amber was an extraordinary resource for the station. She handled most of the domestic violence victims, and it takes a very particular kind of person to thoughtfully handle those matters. And part of her daily routine was to go to each area of the department, to go into the jailer, are you okay? Do you need anything today? Go to the watch sergeant, are you all right? How's your day going? And for me personally, every time I saw her, big smile on her face, big hug, hi darling, how are you today? So I ask that we keep in our thoughts and prayers Detective Amber Least, her parents, her 2 sons. We also need to remember the pain and anguish of the elderly couple and the driver of that car. So proposing an adjournment motion in her memory. Thank you. Now we can notate Commissioner Kerpes is now present. Kerpes, did you have any commission comments at this point? Okay. Moving on to item 9, appeals. The first one is D-4354 CD3 1224 North La Cienega. This appeal was filed by the tenant, Charisse Mitchelson. Charisse, are you present? Am I saying your name correctly, Charisse? Sharis, I'm sorry, I try. And is there a representative here from Empire View Homes? There is. So for those of you not familiar with the process, our staff attorney will make a presentation to the commission. At that point, the commissioners will have the opportunity to ask questions of the staff attorney. At that point, the appellant, you will come to the podium. You have a total of 5 minutes. As the appellant, you can divide your time between your initial comments and a rebuttal for later on. So you just need to let the secretary know how you'd like to divide your time. And when Empire View Homes, you have 5 minutes with no rebuttal time. So with that, Ms. Regan.
Thank you. On January 17, 2019, the hearing examiner awarded Sheriff Michelson a rent decrease of $48.50 until the landlord complied with the order to paint the unit interior. On July 24, 2019, the landlord submitted a request for a compliance determination, claiming they had complied with the order. The tenant objected, claiming that the painting had not been completed. So a hearing was held on September 4th, and the hearing examiner, after reviewing the evidence, determined that the landlord had complied with the order and restored the rent on that issue. Staff recommends that the commission affirm the hearing examiner's decision to restore the rent. There is substantial evidence in the record supporting the decision. The landlord provided testimony and evidence showing that the unit has been painted and that the specific area the tenant objected to has been addressed. Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions for staff attorney? Charisse, if you'd like to come to the podium. I need to remind all parties that we are an appellate body. We cannot consider any new evidence. So if any work has been done subsequent to the last hearing, we cannot entertain any of that into the record. We only can hear what is currently in the record. So come on up and begin. You just state your name and city of residence for the record.
Sheriff Michelson and West Hollywood. Before I start, thank you so much for your beautiful words, Mr. Bernstein, with regard to Detective Amber J. Least. I interacted with her, and she was wonderful. It's a major loss. You want to come up? Thank you. Ready when it's time? The legal department states that I am to be...
One second. How would you like to divide your time between initial comments and
thank
rebuttal?
you very much. I'm going to go ahead and speak for about 2.5 minutes, and Mr. Weber was present at the hearings and this hearing, and he has some commentary as well.
Do you want to maintain any time for rebuttal after the property owner has spoken?
You going to speak? 30 seconds. Okay, I'll maintain it just maybe a minute.
Okay.
you
Secretary,
so
I'll keep the
much.
timer going. Thank you.
Thank you. The legal department states that I'm to be awarded a $48.50 rent decrease until the landlord has complied with the order to paint my unit interior, which still hasn't been performed in full, hence why the rent reduction should remain until the landlord finishes the job. Previously, hearing examiner Judy Sherman didn't allow for the rent reduction to be reversed when the landlord filed a compliance determination due to areas of wall that were still missing paint. I submitted evidence at that time solely as an example of my unit still being without paint, as this example was proof enough that it was still without paint, which Ms. Sherman concurred with. I didn't submit every image of every area of my unit that was missing paint because the issue wasn't how many areas were missing paint, but that my unit walls were still missing paint, which I proved. Please note that the landlord, despite knowing of the issues in my bathroom and others in my unit being without paint, still tried to reverse the rent reduction without performing the needed work. He was not invested in finishing the work then, only in reversing the rent reduction, and it's the same issue now. The mentioned triangular areas in my bathroom that are still missing paint and others are without paint enough to cover the previous paint color,
That's
which
time. Oh, you said for 1 minute?
No, she wanted to maintain 1 minute at the end for the rebuttal.
I'm sorry.
no worries. Which is gray. Images submitted at the recent hearing prove this. The legal department questions why these images weren't submitted previously, as they indeed show areas of wall larger than what Ms. Sherman weighed in on without paint, but I've already answered this. In essence, the legal department admits there are still issues with my unit needing paint, but are more concerned with the timing of the submission of the images. So there is an admission of my unit still needing paint. A worker indeed entered my unit despite the landlord claiming he's denied access to perform maintenance and applied one thin coat of white paint only to the gray triangular shapes in my bathroom that are still missing paint. Other areas of wall that are missing paint were pointed out to him, which Daniel Weber witnessed, but the worker ignored in addressing them. No primer was used when the landlord originally applied paint to most of my unit, and the thin coat of white paint that the worker applied to the triangular shapes without paint in my bathroom absorbed so that the original gray can still very much be seen, which I proved via photos at the hearing. No second coat was ever applied to fully cover the gray. The landlord may have provided a number of images to the city, but they weren't showing the areas in my unit that still need paint, which is deceitful. Also, the landlord has submitted fraudulent invoices to the city from workers in the past, so an invoice, no matter how much it claims to be for, doesn't prove painting was performed. The images I provided show that painting hasn't been completed and still needs to be performed. The current hearing examiner noted that areas of wall are still an issue, which was proven at the hearing, but that perfection is not the standard. The question is, did the landlord paint the unit interior? Not, as was the order by Ms. Sherman. Clearly not, as discrepancies are still noted. The discrepancies are far from an issue of perfection versus non-perfection, as images provided demonstrate larger areas of wall than the triangular shapes in the bathroom, which are still very much without paint, which Ms. Sherman pointed out were not insubstantial. Thus, the larger issues shouldn't be considered insubstantial either. The legal department failed to point out that the current hearing examiner restored the rent reduction not due to the painting being completed, but due to the landlord demonstrating an effort to resolve the issues by entering my unit. Effort by the landlord to finish the work, which was pathetic at best, doesn't equal painting being performed enough to reverse the rent reduction. If I tried to get here tonight, that would show effort, but if I didn't actually arrive, then the effort doesn't mean anything. Again, effort doesn't equal painting being completed. Please keep the rent reduction in place until the landlord has complied with the order to paint my unit interior. Thank you.
I used to be a painter for a property
Microphone
management
closer.
company. I used to be a painter for a property management company, and the person who painted the company that painted for the landlord were a little bit sloppy, and the plastic they put down didn't block their spray from their rollers, and the spray is still present on the ground. They dripped onto the curtain, and that drip is still, they never cleaned that up. And the parts that I showed him
That's
around
time.
the unit were missing
Fine.
lots
If you
of
want to
paint
reserve a
after
minute for
he
the rebuttal,
came
your
to fix
time's
them.
concluded. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you sit down, commissioners, do you have questions at this point? I do. Mr. Noonan, do you have a packet that we can give her? I need to go through some of the photographs. If you can help me clarify some of the photos, I'll tell you which page numbers, just to help me understand who submitted what and when.
Sure.
And the packet, the page number's on the lower right of the page, kind of the big number. Starting on page 23 of the packet through page 25. I think those are photographs that you submitted.
I'm going to take
Yep.
a look here.
Thanks.
Not quite there. Thank you.
23, there's a tape measure and,
That is from the landlord.
okay.
23
23,
is
24, and
from the
25 were
landlord.
not submitted by you. And if you could
not
flip to page 29.
That is my photograph, as is 30.
Can
as
you just
is-
kind of, starting on page 29, just kind of walk me through, because it didn't copy really well in the packet. Just tell me what wall I'm looking at, and was this before any painting was done or after painting was done? Excuse me.
Thank you. This was after the painting was performed.
Okay, so what am I looking at? What are we looking at on page 29?
You're looking at an area in my bathroom near
Bathroom?
my shower. Yes, sir.
30?
30, you are also looking at another area in my bathroom.
31?
That is the area that the landlord says is completed with painting. That's the triangular area.
32?
32 is from the landlord.
Okay, as is 33.
Yes.
34, page 35.
Those are submitted by me, and they show areas missing paint in my bathroom, and the two triangular areas that the landlord said were completed with the painting.
And then one last set of photos, if you go to pages 68 through 76,
Sure.
just kind of walk me through what we're looking at, what areas of your apartment, and when were these submitted?
Sure. 68 is my photograph, and it shows an area underneath my sink where no paint was applied.
Kitchen or bathroom?
This is my bathroom.
Okay.
So there's they put spackle on the wall because there was a hole in my wall from an ongoing leak, which is now back, and they never applied paint to that area at all. So it's still spackle underneath there.
69 is also the underneath your bathroom sink?
Yes, sir. So you can see the gray paint versus the white paint.
Page 70?
Those are the triangular areas
Okay.
that the landlord said were completed.
Page 71?
That's an area up near my ceiling that is also still missing
which
paint
ceiling?
in my bathroom.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
72?
That's another area in my bathroom.
Bathroom?
Yes, sir.
73?
Also in my bathroom.
74?
In my bathroom.
75?
Those are in my dining area. They did not remove the electrical outlet covers before,
And these pictures were taken after the initial paint job or before any painting was done?
after the painting
Okay.
was performed.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yes, sir.
Commissioners, any further questions at this point? You can have a seat. And sir, from Empire View Homes? You can state your name and city of residence. You have a total of 5 minutes, and again, no new evidence in the record.
Okay, thank you. It's Steve Short, and I live in Los Angeles.
Speak a little closer to the microphone.
Okay, Steve Short, Los Angeles. We agree with the staff report that states the most recent compliance determination on December 3rd, where they state that we are substantially in compliance. It also notes in that compliance determination that 3 additional visits were required to complete this painting after the initial painting back in May 2019. Just to give the commission a little background, and all this is in the record when we were going through the hearings at City Hall, the painting was done in May of 2019 at a cost of around $2,900. As I stated in the initial hearings in City Hall, the tenant slowed the vendor down considerably. We're talking about painting a relatively small apartment, maybe 400 square feet, something like that. It took 4 days for the vendor to complete that job. And after the job was done, the vendor went over the work, and the vendor is a separate third party. It's not our guy. Our guy can paint an apartment, but we thought it'd be better if a vendor did it. So he went over there, did the job, and went over everything with the tenant before leaving. And my understanding is she pointed out a couple of things, okay, and then he fixed them, and then that was that. We never heard from the tenant that there was an issue, that, hey, oh, you didn't finish this job. It was only after we submitted for compliance determination to get the rent reduction restored. So that tells me that there was probably not a problem, because if there was, we would have heard about it. But I think the evidence is clear, and I'm glad staff agrees. We've been over there multiple times. painted the apartment completely. It looks great. You know, I think there's been, you know, 3 compliance determinations on this case at this point. You know, we fix it, you know, we completely paint it, and then there's a problem on this wall, we go back and paint it, and then everything's supposedly fine, but then we submit for a compliance determination, and there's another issue. So it's always, no matter what we do, there's some other issue that pops up somehow, some way after the fact, and that's what I believe we're dealing with. The other thing I want to say really quickly, I'm going to bring this up in the next case, is that we have gone over there multiple times, and the tenant doesn't let us do the work. We're trying to do some work in this for the next case that I'm about to talk about later. We couldn't do that work, but when we went over there, August 12th, August 14th, August 15th, August 13th, August 22, August 23, we couldn't do any of that work. We couldn't do any painting work that supposedly needed to be done. So it's clear that the paint work was done, but at the same time, we're not allowed access to get in to do the work. So, you know, it's just really hard as a landlord to be in that predicament where we're not allowed access, and at the same time, the person preventing access gets a rent reduction of $48.50. And again, for work that's already done. So that's it. Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Maggio?
Sir, have you had an opportunity to look at these photograph exhibits in the packet?
I have.
And do you think the work is complete?
I know the work is complete. If you want to ask me about certain photographs, I'll be happy to talk through each one.
No, I think we've gone through them, but I just wanted to be aware if you went through them, that's all.
Yeah, I went through them, and again, been over there multiple times, paid a lot of money for a vendor to do the whole apartment initially. And we're still, you know, where we are, unfortunately, and I'm sorry to have to be before you tonight for this issue yet again, but
Maybe I could ask you to review page 72 and 73.
sure. 72 and 73. Okay.
I see warping, bubbling? Do you see any of that?
I see it. I know that when we completed the job, that was not there. And one of the tenant talked a lot about these triangular.
Yeah, but I'm talking
Triangular issue.
specifically these photographs.
Right. I don't know where those photographs are from. They're not dated, but that was definitely not the condition. I mean, these are extreme close-ups of some little imperfections, but the entire bathroom was completed. It was painted.
Looks like moisture to me. And
It does. It's by a bathroom shower, and one of the things we've talked about with the tenant is making sure her shower door is closed when it's being used. Otherwise, this can happen. But, you know, to me, it's clear water is splashing out, but all I know is we painted it, and we did a great job, and we paid a lot of money to have it painted. And all we heard about was the triangular issue, never really the bathroom issue till much later. I mean, this is not an accurate representation of what the apartment looked like after we painted it.
how about page 37 with the fixtures that haven't been taken off?
Page
The
37.
paneling. 37.
Yeah, again, these are extreme close-ups of areas on her wall that are centimeters, if not millimeters, in size. The tenant has a habit of taking extreme close-up pictures and saying, oh, this is a huge issue. Even if there is a tiny dot on the ceiling in the bathroom wall, even if the vendor didn't take off this, the plate that covers the outlet, and there's a tiny outline of the old paint that you can't see unless you move the outlet cover.
It's bubbling. It's excess. It's hanging on the plate itself, like old paint or dried up paint.
Which picture on page 37?
37, lower right.
Yeah, I see a tiny millimeter imperfection at the corner of a really small outlet plate, yes. And
Okay,
I'll give you that. I just think, even if that is the case right now, I just think that's really, really minor, and I would agree with staff that we've substantially complied with painting the tenant's apartment.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all the questions I have.
Commissioner Kerpes?
Yeah, just based upon, again, these pictures are hard for us to see, but did you use the same color of paint to paint over the triangles that you used originally? Or that was used originally, not you used, but originally?
Okay. On the...
Use a different color paint?
Yes,
than
yes.
You would use a different color paint?
Right. We, the apartment was like a gray color. The apartment was like a gray color, and we painted it white. And whenever you change colors, you apply primer. So I'm not sure where the tenant is getting that the vendor didn't use primer, but they're professional contractors. And
yeah, so I guess just so we don't confuse each other. My question is, so when you went in and painted the bathroom wall, and then later there were those 2 marks
Right.
that were discovered, and someone went back in and painted those over, correct?
That's correct.
Did they use the same color paint that they used originally
Yes,
on the
they
wall?
did. Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
You mentioned that you've been in front of the hearing examiner 3 times, or you've been in for 3 compliance hearings, but did I read the record correctly that 2 of those you weren't in compliance?
I think we've been here 2 or 3 times on this paint issue since we painted it in May of 2019. That's,
But only the most recent one did the hearing examiner find you in compliance?
I think so.
I believe that is all the questions I have right now.
You can have a seat, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And you have 1 minute for rebuttal. Charisse?
All issues were discussed with the landlord. The issues are not moisture related. They were there ever since the painting was completed, if you will, even though I don't consider it completed. The area under my bathroom sink is missing paint entirely. It's just spackle without any paint applied to it. I don't shower with the door open. And I've never stopped the landlord from performing maintenance. I welcome maintenance, it's needed. No primer was applied. I was actually present when the painters were in my unit. One of the issues with the painters was they used 2 different colors of paint. Then they discovered their mistake because it was like a cream color and then a white color, and then they had to repaint that area, but no primer was applied. That's pretty much it with my rebuttal.
Commissioners, any further questions?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
Did you ever refuse entry to any of the painters?
No, sir, I didn't.
Did you ever ask them to wear boots, cover
No.
their shoes?
No, they did. They wore booties.
They did wear booties.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Do you still have the, oh, sorry, Chair. Sorry. Do you still have the packet there in front of you?
Yes, sir, I do.
So on page 26, this is your letter stating that you disagree or you object to the compliance. You're stating that they're not in compliance. That is the most recent one, right? For the hearing that was just held, or not just held, but this is regarding the bathroom, correct? So they went for their second time to request a compliance, said that they had been back through, painted everything, and then that's when you objected. My question is, so
I believe this is this was the letter to Ms. Sherman, the first one.
in response
Is it?
to the landlord's request for compliance determination, right? And so you objected to that.
I did
This is
object
the
to
most recent, other than today's appeal, this is what caused that hearing to occur.
Yeah, Ms. Sherman, there was a letter of me objecting the original compliance determination, and then that was considered by Ms. Sherman. She determined that painting had not indeed been completed, and then the landlord applied for a second compliance determination. I objected to that one as well, and that led to the hearing that we had.
And that's the objection that I'm looking for. Where is the objection in this packet of this most recent one that would bring us here?
I don't know. This is the first time I'm seeing this packet, so I'm so sorry. I'm not familiar.
Looking here for the date of the hearing. The date was. Response. So you filed the response on August 8th, which would match. Yes. So the most recent. The compliance determination was requested on July 24th, and if you turn to page 26, that letter that you sent was objecting to that, which was the tenant response filed August 8th. And if you look at the top of the page, it says 8/8/19.
Is that the second one then? I'm sorry, there's been so many letters I've sent to the
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to clarify, and it looks like it is the second one. It's the most recent one, I should say.
Sure.
So in that letter,
Just to interject,
You
look at
submitted-
page 65. I'm not sure if that's a more recent.
page 26?
Page 65, just to, because there's no date at the top of that. I'm not sure if that's a more recent letter than the one you're referencing on page 26.
I believe that one was more substantive, and so that was the first one.
Page
Correct, Seth?
65 is part of the appeal itself.
I'm sorry?
Page 65 is part of the appeal.
Tonight's
What-
appeal?
What she submitted with her appeal.
Okay. So that would be more recent than the letter on page.
Maybe I'm using, so yes, you're right, it would be more recent, but I guess what I'm trying to figure out is what the hearing examiner was reviewing when he or she was determining whether they were in compliance or not. And so the landlord brought a document saying compliance, and I want to make sure this is the letter that was the objection to that. And he referenced the what am I saying, the pictures. Where's a little bit of Sorry, for one moment. You have my questions for staff. Was there pictures submitted with that determination letter, or was it in the hearing that?
With her objection?
Yeah.
Yes, and so that was Exhibit 1 as part of the hearing, and so that's in your packet as well.
And I'm trying to, the first
I'll
couple
see if I
pages.
can't find that for you.
So I thought pages 23 and 24 were hers, but I just found out they're not. So I thought that's what. Oh, which would probably be these right here, 27 through,
Yes, 29.
38, is that? According to page 27 it is. Okay, so you did submit all of these pages with your objection. All right. Thank you. I kind of answered my own self after talking
Thank
out loud.
you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
Commissioners, further questions?
Okay,
Okay, thank you. You can have a
thank
seat.
you.
And with that, we can begin our deliberations. Who would like to begin?
You want to start? I'll keep mine simple because it says substantial evidence in the record that supports the determination that the landlord has completed or complied with the hearing examiner's order. I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. I think this is the worst paint job I've ever seen. There's no repair. There's other paint that shows through the light paint. No, this is not completed work, not with these exhibits and not what I'm looking at.
Mr. Charity?
So for me, the key word turns on substantial, and do we have substantial evidence that the hearing examiner ruled with the evidence before them, and when I look at the record, I see that the vast amount of the apartment was repainted. For the compliance determination, all we need to see is substantial compliance. Those are just the words of our rent stabilization ordinance. So I'm inclined to support staff's recommendation, only because I do see that the vast majority of the apartment was repainted. In the perfect world, would the landlord simply just give this tenant the paint in the paint brush to fix the errors? Yes, that would be wonderful to smooth things over. But just based on the RSO, everything turns for me on the keyword substantial, and I just can't find with the evidence submitted that there wasn't substantial compliance here.
I'm going to agree with Commissioner Charity. I think for me, it turns on our maintenance standard, and we don't expect our landlords to be perfect. We hold them to the same standard across the board, which is to act reasonably necessary to perform the maintenance here. And no maintenance job is perfect. I live in an apartment. It's never perfect. I wish it was. That's not the law that we enforce. That's not the law that we have written on our books. And I think the evidence submitted, what the hearing examiner looked at, the photos provided, it's in very good condition. It's not perfect, but that's not the standard we are here to enforce. So I would uphold the hearing examiner's decision in this case.
I would agree with Commissioners Charity and Martz. Our role is not to substitute our judgment for that of the hearing examiner or to reweigh the evidence. If there's evidence to support the conclusion, then we're supposed to uphold it. One of the pieces of evidence was Exhibit 3, which was the landlord's picture of the painted triangular issues that were the ones that were raised in the original objection. So we cannot substitute our own opinion for that of the hearing examiner if there's evidence to support it. So I would agree with staff and the hearing examiner.
Mr. Kerpes?
I am going to agree with my colleagues only because it seems like it's clear that that the paint job was shoddy, but what this last hearing examiner was limited in scope in what he was basing his decision on compliance or not was because of the way that the hearing examiner had written her conclusion in the previous application or hearing, previous determination hearing. And it seemed like the only two outstanding issues from that determination hearing were the small triangular spots, even though it seems to me that there were more issues than that, but that's what this hearing examiner had to go off of, was the conclusion of that previous hearing determination, which was very limited in scope, and it does look like they finally addressed those two minor issues. So I'll have to agree that with staff.
I would agree with my fellow commissioners, aside from Commissioner Maggio. As the record states, small imperfections are noted, but the order doesn't require perfection, just to reasonably perform maintenance. So worked a little sloppy, yes. Should things like, light plate fixtures be taken off the wall and then painted, then placed back? But the work is substantially done. So I would be in favor of upholding the hearing examiner's decision. In a perfect world, with the advent of modern technology, everyone has cell phones, or most everyone has cell phones with a camera to, when a job is completed, to maybe walk around with both the worker and the tenant and say, this is the kitchen wall, this is this wall, we all think that this is done. It would make for a great record, but I haven't seen that coming before our commission yet, nothing electronic. And with that, would anyone like to make a motion? Mr. O'Keefe?
I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution RSC 20-568, a resolution of the Rent Stabilization Commission of the City of West Hollywood affirming the hearing examiner's decision on D-4354 CD3 1224 North La Cienega Boulevard.
Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Okay. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner O'Keefe.
Aye.
Commissioner Kerpes.
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio.
No.
Commissioner Martz.
Aye.
Commissioner Charity.
Aye.
Vice Chair Topchin is absent. Chair Bergstein.
Aye, and the motion passes. Either party has any questions pertaining to this matter, feel free to approach staff at the end of the meeting. And with that, we'll go into our next appeal, D-4460, 1216-1224 North La Cienega Boulevard. Both parties are appellants in this matter, which I haven't seen before in this commission. So I did check with our staff attorney, and she said with that, both parties still have their 5 minutes. They're both entitled to split their time between initial comments and rebuttal. I'm not sure how we choose who goes first. Ms. Regan, is there, or do we just toss a coin?
No, the appeal was filed first by, I believe, Ms. Michelson, but I will double check. It's whoever filed first goes first.
Okay, but we'll start with the staff report, and then we'll figure out in which order people will speak.
So yes, Ms. Michelson filed her appeal first. Sheriff Michelson has lived at 1224 North La Cienega since May 2011. She filed a rent adjustment application and was awarded a rent reduction for 5 issues totaling $55. Both the landlord and the tenant have appealed. The tenant has appealed the issues of the back pathway / retaining wall and the maintenance closet area. The landlord has appealed all the issues on which a rent reduction was granted. They are gas service, pest control, hardwood floors, kitchen cabinets, and bathroom walls. Staff recommends that the commission affirm in part and remand in part the hearing examiner's decision. There is substantial evidence supporting the hearing examiner's findings regarding the back pathway, sorry for the typo, maintenance closet, gas service, and pest control. On the issues of the flooring, kitchen cabinets, and the bathroom walls in the tenant's unit, the hearing examiner did not analyze whether the tenant's actions caused the landlord's inability to make the requested repairs, so staff recommends that the commission remand to the hearing examiner just on those issues. Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have questions for our attorney? Okay. Sharisa, you'll begin. No formality, but state your name and city of residence just for the record, and let our secretary know how you'd like to divide your time.
Yes, sir. Sheriff Michelson, West Hollywood, and I'm going to speak for the entire 5 minutes. I have a lot to say. Apologies, I'm going to speak very quickly.
You don't wish to retain any time for rebuttal after the landlord has spoken?
I don't think I'll have any.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The legal department is incorrect. The hearing examiner did review photo and video evidence supporting that I allowed the landlord into my unit in all rooms multiple times over many, many months. And on all occasions, he required entry, which was witnessed by Daniel Weber, who attended the hearings, who personally saw the landlord gain full entry to my unit to make any needed repairs. The landlord is being intentionally and selectively misleading about not gaining entry, as he claims he finished painting in my unit to reverse a warranted rent reduction, but if he didn't gain access to paint, how did he complete that repair? He was fully aware of all other needed repairs at that time, yet didn't perform them. For example, he claims to have painted areas in my bathroom, yet why didn't he repair the hole in the bathroom wall when he was in the same room? The answer is he's only motivated to reverse rent reductions, not to actually perform maintenance. After posting multiple 24-hour notices over many months and always gaining full entry to my unit, the landlord either doesn't bring what's needed to perform repairs, tells me he's not performing repairs, or shows up too late to perform repairs, and sometimes he doesn't bother to show up at all. Him not performing repairs isn't my fault, it's his. The issue of shoe removal has to do with the landlord knocking my property to the ground, not picking it up and putting it back when I asked him, and he said he would, and intentionally and blatantly wiping his dog feces and construction debris-coated shoes on my floor after walking all over my unit with them, and intentionally loitering to take up my time, yet still not performing any needed repairs. Due to this issue of abuse, the RSO advised me to request him to remove his shoes or wear booties over his shoes going forward, which has always been my policy anyway, which the landlord previously complied with. I shouldn't have to tolerate blatant abuse, which the city concurs with, and I hope you feel the same. The landlord's new false excuse for not performing maintenance is that shoe booties, which contain strong foot traction, are sold as the industry standard for real estate and are worn without issue by health department inspectors, deputies, and maintenance workers aren't safe, when there is no evidence or incident to support this false claim. His workers still wear booties for higher rent-paying tenants, which I've confirmed, and I provided the landlord with a list of workers, which was reviewed as evidence at the hearing, who will wear booties without issues. There isn't any excuse for the landlord not performing maintenance. The landlord has never personally performed any maintenance of any kind anyway, but rather demonstrates incompetence around maintenance issues. So his presence isn't required to perform any maintenance. And he doesn't show up when workers perform maintenance for higher rent paying tenants as it isn't needed, pointing to his presence only serving as a means to create opportunities to harass me, which he's done on many occasions. The legal department is incorrect with regard to the retaining wall along the back pathway. Previously, hearing examiner Judy Sherman pointed out I hadn't included the retaining wall in my application, so the issue wasn't weighed on. Only the back pathway was weighed on, as I had only listed the back pathway. The current hearing examiner looked at Ms. Sherman's findings, yet there were no findings as to the retaining wall, only with regard to the back pathway. At the most recent hearing, I showed evidence of pieces of the retaining wall dislodging and falling onto the back pathway. How can this not be evidence of a change in the structure enough to warrant a rent reduction? It's literally crumbling where material that was in place is now no longer in place. This solid evidence demonstrating measurable change should be considered for the very measurable decline of the retaining wall, and a rent reduction is warranted. With regard to the maintenance area, which the landlord and legal department refer to as a closet, even though it's the size of 2 one-bedroom apartments, is indeed many times open, which is how I was able to provide photos of it for the hearing. If a member of the legal team had sat in on the hearing or listened to the audio recording on CD, which is available, they would have heard the previous hearing examiner, Judy Sherman, point out that the maintenance area, whether used by tenants or not, is indeed considered a common area that must be maintained. Not all information provided at a hearing makes it into the record. The record is an abbreviation of the hearing and also includes subjective opinion by the hearing examiner. Thus, the legal department hasn't fully investigated the history of the hearing enough to make an entirely trustworthy conclusion on this matter. The health department indeed deemed the maintenance area, which includes a huge hole in the ceiling created by a leak in need of repair, and as it's mandatory for a landlord to maintain the premises, just as Ms. Sherman pointed out. The health department has noted that pests enter my unit from outside my unit via unsealed areas in my unit and aren't emanating from within my unit, which has been communicated to the landlord multiple times. I personally contacted the pest company and discovered that the landlord didn't have a record of spraying the back of the building at all where I reside, where there are pests. This evidence from the pest control company was provided at the hearing. Until the landlord sprays the areas where pests are emanating from regularly and seals the areas of my unit that are open to pests, the issue will remain, hence a rent reduction is warranted until the issues have been resolved. Once again, the landlord's lack of maintenance is his fault. No one except him is stopping him from spraying where pests are emanating from. The landlord posted a notice from Western Exterminator on my door yesterday notifying me that spraying would be performed in my unit when spraying in my unit isn't needed. I contacted Western Exterminator and they told me they weren't scheduled to come to my unit at all and the landlord's account had been inactive for some time. They requested I email them the fraudulent posting and use of their company's information, which I did. The landlord entered my unit again today, which Daniel
That's
can attest
time.
to, yet still no maintenance was performed.
Commissioners, any questions at this point?
Only answer this if you discussed it in the hearing examiner's, an original hearing, please, since otherwise it would be new evidence. But do you offer to provide the booties, or would?
Yes, I do. I have them and I provide them.
Thank you.
And they have traction.
Thank you.
They're actually industry standard real estate booties, I made sure.
Thank you.
Yes,
Further questions? Thank you. You can have a seat.
thank you.
Sir? And since she used her entire time, you don't need to reserve any for rebuttal. You can use your entire 5 minutes at this point.
Okay, thank you. I'm Steve Short, Los Angeles. Before we start, can I just say, Commissioner Bergstein mentioned Detective Amber Lease. She actually helped me just a few weeks ago when I had to file a police report against the tenant behind me for trying to follow me into a maintenance room, literally pushing the door on me and striking my hand in the process. And she was really, really super helpful. I know it was kind of a minor issue according to the detective, so we disagreed on that, but professionally she was great. And when I read about her, I don't know, a week ago or whenever it just kind of reminds you how you just never know when it's your time. And it's, you know, from all my dealings with her, she was great. And it just kind of hit home because I had just, you know, dealt with her recently. But anyway, so I thank the commissioner for acknowledging that person, Detective Least. So I just wanted to throw it out there. And to start, I would like to start with the back pathway that the hearing examiner and the staff agreed with us that it, wasn't a substantial issue. I think this is something the tenant does, unfortunately, is just exaggerate little things and try to make mountains out of molehills by doing extreme close-ups of, a spot on a wall, a paint spot, as Commissioner Maggio mentioned last time, or a crack on a sidewalk. And I think that's what she is doing here, just exaggerating little things. The walkway's in great shape. The pathway, the retaining wall, it's in great shape. The maintenance area that the tenant isn't appealing, I won't touch on that other than to say that's the maintenance area she tried to force her way into that I just referred to, but I know you can't consider that, but that's the maintenance area. It's totally our maintenance area. It's not a tenant provided, or it's not a service we provide to our tenants. If the door's open, it's only temporary when workers are going back and forth quickly. But the tenant knows she shouldn't be in there. She knows it's not a place where tenants should be. As a landlord, we're appealing 3 issues: gas service, some interior issues like flooring, kitchen cabinets, bathroom walls, and we're also appealing pest control. Let me start with the gas. It's disturbing because both the examiner and the staff sort of state with absolute certainty that the landlord was providing gas service. Well, again, as Sheriff mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm not sure that anybody listened to the audio, but there's probably 4 or 5 hours of audio from the 2 meetings we had over this rent reduction hearing. I think we had it over 2 days, like 4 or 5 hours. But I think they're trying to tie together the fact that the tenant had gas service and trying to make it the same as the landlord providing that gas service. We're not in the business of providing gas service to any tenant. It was never in our name. We never paid for gas service. It was never in our name for that unit. That's not my opinion. That's not a guess. That is a fact. I personally called the gas company, and as I stated in the hearing, they told me, as I think I stated in the hearing, they told me no one was paying for gas or had an account for gas service at the tenant's apartment since before she moved in 2011. Gas company will leave the gas on as long as there's little or no usage, but once there's usage started, then they'll come out and say, hey, tenant, call us and establish an account, and that's what they did with this tenant, I believe. A housing service is one that's provided by the landlord. We are not in the gas business. We never provide a gas service, period, never in our name. The last 2 things are the stuff on the inside that I just mentioned. She states, the tenant states she let us in and there's pictures of it. Well, there's pictures of us being right inside the doorway where she films us, whenever we're around, puts a camera in our face. But she doesn't let us go in to do the work. And again, August 12th, 13th, 14th, August 15th, August 22nd, August 23rd. And she mentioned today, yes, we tried to go in today with the exterminator who she says we don't have an account with, but he was right there with us, ready to spray her apartment for these supposed insect issues. So when someone doesn't let you in, again, it's kind of hard to fix the issues. And I agree with the staff that we should remand it back to the hearing examiner. I think that's the fair thing to do. And I would also disagree with staff. I think we should remand the pest control issue back to the examiner too, because again, if there's a pest control issue in the apartment, we just want to go in and treat it. Now, if somebody prevents us from treating it, then we can't do it, so.
That's time.
Commissioners, any questions? I have one. It may have been for Sharice, for you, I'm sorry, but on page 114 of our packet is an initial gas bill with a balance of $127.75. It looks like the usage is like around $6 a month-ish for that unit. I was just curious, I'm not sure if it pertains to the matter or not, but why that initial bill was, who submitted that bill? Did you submit that? Okay, I'll come back to you in a second on that. Any questions for the property owner? You can have a seat, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to recuse myself on this because I don't believe that I could make a fair decision based upon the offended feelings I have right now based upon Mr. Smith, I believe, Mr. Short's attempt to manipulate the council or the commission with his comments about the deputy that passed away. I found that, I'll just say, offensive, and so I'm not going to participate in this hearing, and I'll step aside or outside.
Ms. Regan, did you need to make a comment on that? Okay.
No, it's up to the individual commissioners.
Okay. Teresa, can you just clarify that initial bill dated February 7th, 2019 for $127.75?
Let me just, what page is it on, sir?
Page 114 of our record.
Yes, sir. Yes, the landlord has always provided gas.
My question is just, why is that initial bill 127? Your
Wh-
subsequent bills are more like $6 range.
Yes, the landlord turned off the gas, and I didn't know it until I had the gas company worker knock on my door and tell me that my gas was being shut off.
Was there a turn-on fee to resume the service?
It was never turned off. They just said, it's going to be turned off if you don't pay your bill. I said, well, the bill's always been paid by the landlord. Well, you have to pay the bill now. They stopped paying for it. So they said they didn't have any of my information. And I had to create an account. And so I created an account to be able to...
I'm curious as to why that initial bill is 127. It's always for prior,
For
from the beginning of your
multiple
tenants?
months, since 2017. So it was
Okay.
late 2018 is when they came to my unit to tell me that they were going to shut it off if the bill wasn't paid.
Okay,
So I didn't know my gas had been interrupted until that time.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
With that, we can begin our deliberations. Who would like to start? Okay, not generally the chair to start, but I'll jump right in. On the maintenance closet, I agree with staff that there is no reduction in service. This is not, we had a case about a year ago where there was an individual closet in a hallway in a building that was only for the use of that tenant, and the landlord removed it. That was reduction in housing service. This appears to be a maintenance closet for the use of the staff of the building and not for the individual tenant. So I would agree with staff on that. The gas service, I have gone back and forth on this. On one hand, the lease very clearly says that gas and electric are not provided by the landlord, they're provided by the tenant. On the tenant's meters, excuse me, sorry ma'am, your time has expired. Nothing on the registration form. So kind of one of the questions in my head is, at what point, if something's provided, is it go to from being assumed to being a housing service? However, on page 178 of our record, the landlord said they left the gas service in its name because it was minimal. That, to me, is an indication that it's become the landlord's responsibility. So in that case, I also agree with the hearing examiner that gas service was provided by the property owner and would need to continue. Any subsequent tenancies, just make it clear and have the gas turned off in time. I can. I had a unit where it didn't realize that trash service was included on electric bill. Same thing. Pest control, again, I think I agree with the hearing examiner that we need to have a further exploration on that, of whether the tenant is allowing people to come into the unit to do the work. Same with the hardwood floors. I am a little, I'm not an expert in construction, concerned that the requirement to wear booties could create a slip, trip, fall hazard, but I'm not a construction expert. I don't know if that is a standard procedure in maintenance projects where they wear these protective coverings.
There's two different types. Those are grips.
I'm sorry?
There are two different types. Those grip.
Okay. So I would be in favor of agreeing with staff recommendation that there is to remand those issues back for further exploration to see if the tenant is allowing access for them, and then the gas service and the pathway and the back entry as is.
So just to clarify, you want to remand which issues? Just the
The hardwood floors, the pest control, kitchen cabinets, bathroom walls.
okay, so yeah, so just greater than this recommendation is what you're saying.
I'm sorry?
You want to remand more things than the staff recommendation,
I think the staff recommended the hardwood floors, kitchen cabinets, bathroom walls.
and you want to remand also pest control
And the
Yes.
gas.
and the gas.
Gas,
No, you know,
gas, I
you're-
agree
you're-
with,
you
with
agree with-
staff's
right.
recommendation.
Yeah, for me, I think it just turns on our, our task as an appellate body, and was there substantial evidence before the hearing examiner that supports their decision. We can't reweigh the evidence, so when I look at issues like the back pathway, maybe it, cuts both ways for me, but the hearing examiner saw it a certain way. Am I going to overrule that? Do I think there was evidence before them that they could have ruled that the way they did? Yeah, I do. The maintenance area, again, it seems very clear that that's not a common area. The hearing examiner found it that way. I see it that way too. As Commissioner Bergstein said, the gas service, I do see it as the landlord provided that service until 2017. There's evidence in the record showing that. There's evidence in the record showing a new account. So I have to go with the hearing examiner. On pest control, I see, evidence of pests in the record. I see that the hearing examiner could have ruled that way with the, evidence before them, so I'm going with that. Floor, kitchen cabinets, bathroom walls. Sometimes in the law we have these things where you have not great evidence on either side. Both parties here are telling us two completely different things, so the recommendation is to remand. I'm going to go with that. I wasn't there at the hearing examiner's decision. I didn't hear the evidence. I'm not here to reweigh it. I'm here to just see did they have substantial evidence to go one way or the other. The recommendation to remand it, because we do have this split on the evidence presented from the parties, I'm fine to go with it from staff. So, in general, even though maybe I would have things go one way or the other based on how I would look at the evidence, our role is an appellate body. We just have to see the evidence that was before the hearing examiner to see if they have enough to make a decision at that time. So I'm more inclined to support the staff's recommendation. However, just personally, when we read the record and we hear the testimony, obviously this is a very hostile relationship. And it's just, sad that things have, degraded so far. And I hope that, as we determine some of these issues, that there can be some healing here, and the parties can respect the decisions of the commission, and we can put some of this to rest over time so it doesn't escalate where we're getting police involved or violence is happening. Or because I can just see in the record that the tone of even the letters that are being written is getting personal and nasty, and I hope that at some point the parties can come together and help each other and go above and beyond, meaning if we are making a decision based in one party's favor or the other, that the party that technically loses could make a concession and still help out. For instance, giving some paint to your tenant if they just asked for paint to correct some of the things, even though we restored the rent. Because, we live in a great city in West Hollywood, and I just would hope that you could find some peace here too. That's it for me.
Mr. Maggio?
I concur without going into detail. And I suppose I want to add that I believe that Miss Michelson really wants a beautiful home. She wants it to be kept well. So I want us to take always that into consideration. And I think she's trying to obtain that not only for her own living space, but for the whole building. So I wouldn't be so critical of her. But I will concur with Commissioner Charity's assessment.
I will also concur with Commissioner Charity. When we look at the record, there are multiple times that I would love if the hearing examiner did X, Y, or Z differently. That's not the role that I have as a commissioner. My job is to look at the evidence that they've presented to us, listen to the parties here, and deliberate with my fellow commissioners. I think the staff's recommendation is correct. Sometimes we want to overturn the hearing examiner, but if there's substantial evidence that they made the correct decision, we're not here to reweigh that, like my fellow commissioner said. As to the landlord's representative's comments about the detective we lost, anything nice that's said about her, that's fine, and we appreciate it, so that doesn't weigh into my determination here. And just as much as the tenant would like a beautiful home, I think we also have to remember that our landlords, some are good, some are bad, and some are in between, and I think in this situation, at least what I see is a landlord taking the time to try to address these concerns, and a tenant that does want a home that's nice and well-kept, and that's why we have maintenance standards here and rules for everyone to follow. So I think Commissioner Charity is correct in his determination, and that's how I would vote.
I would, for the most part, agree with the hearing examiner and staff's recommendation. I would not, I don't think, remand the issues of whether or not there was interference with entering the apartment. I did not, there was a 4-hour hearing. I don't know what all was considered or not. We have a very short record. It looks in the record like those issues were ones that are actually disputed. The fact that they needed repair in the record, it says with the bathroom walls that Mr. Short represented he would like to replace it in the future. With the kitchen cabinet, it says that while the hearing examiner agrees that replacing them isn't necessary, Ms. Michelson credibly states that their condition has declined and need to be restored. It sounded like there was dispute over whether or not they were actually deteriorated, so I'm not sure if the issue was even raised in that context of whether or not there was an impediment to people getting in. And we just have such a small window into those 4 hours, so I'm not going to assume that the hearing examiner didn't consider conflicting testimony, possibly on whether or not that there was impeding the entry of people to do the work and that it wasn't just contested in the first place. So I agree that there is substantial evidence to support the hearing examiner regarding the back pathway and retaining wall, that perhaps it might be somewhat of a reduction. I believe the phrase that was used here was a measurable change. That doesn't necessarily mean a substantial reduction in the housing service. And the hearing examiner found that the identical photos, essentially very similar condition, was submitted before. The maintenance area, I would agree with the hearing examiner that there's evidence to support that it was not a common area. That said, one of the complaints seemed to be about a hole in the maintenance area, allowing pests in, and that goes to the pest control issue. So I would say part of remedying the pest control, if they're coming from the maintenance area, should include that. A roof might not be a common area, but if there's a hole in a roof that's letting water in, that certainly would still need to be fixed. And then there's, I believe, substantial evidence to support the decision of the hearing examiner and the other 5 issues that the landlord appealed. So I would agree with the hearing examiner entirely.
And just, I kind of wanted to echo some of Commissioner Charity's comments. It pains me when I see a relationship where so many instances come to the city for assistance. It is our job to hear the appeals, and we, gladly do our job up here, but it does pain me to see a relationship between a tenant and landlord be to this degree. And would hope that something can be worked out for a better, harmonious relationship for the resident and the property owner. And as for the comments about Detective Lease, I appreciate the comments, the thoroughness of her work, but the comments about specific incident that had nothing to do with this hearing had no bearing on my decision for this evening. With that, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we adopt Resolution RSC 20-569, a resolution of the West Hollywood Rent Stabilization Commission affirming in part and remanding in part the hearing examiner's decision on D-4460 at the address 1224 North La Cienega Boulevard.
Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Thank you. We have a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner O'Keefe?
No?
Commissioner Kirpies is abstaining. Commissioner Maggio?
Yes.
Commissioner Martz?
Aye.
Commissioner Charity?
Aye.
Vice Chair Topchan is absent. Chair Bergstein?
Aye. Motion passes. Again, if either party has any questions, feel free to approach staff. I'm not sure if Commissioner Kirpies is still in the building. Okay. Why don't we take like a 2-minute recess? Oh, he's back.
Yeah, he's taking him. SUV people.
You're back, I'm sorry. Stuck behind me.
Yeah.
Call the meeting back to order. And then, item 10, new business.
Good evening again. This is an item for the commission to decide if it would like to hold meetings on March 26th and on April 9th, I believe, at another location. As alluded to earlier in the meeting, the chamber here will be under renovation, and so we have had a look and found that Fiesta Hall is available on that evening. We can televise with arranging that with AV in advance. And so I turn it over to the commission to determine if, in fact, you will have a quorum and if you would like to hold a special meeting on either of those evenings at Fiesta Hall, or if you will not have a quorum, and in that case, we would go ahead and cancel one or both of those meetings. So again, it is the March 26th meeting and the April 9th meeting.
Just to clarify, we had a discussion with staff before the meeting. They are able to televise from Fiesta Hall, is that correct?
Yes, I believe that staff did inform us that they can televise from Fiesta Hall. We will hold off on scheduling appeals on either of those nights, so that we will keep appeals here in the chamber. So this would be an opportunity to look at some of those other items that the commission would like to discuss.
Over half of our commission resides on the east side. I think 4 of us do, but we haven't had a meeting on the east side in many years, so I'd be in favor of holding both March 26th and April 9th at Fiesta Hall. I'd be open to suggestion where, I know Commissioner Maggio, you have suggested we have an additional study session, or we could agendize a couple of action items the commission's discussed earlier in the year. Commissioner O'Keefe?
Yeah, so we approved our priorities several months ago, and they went to commission, and commission then put them on hold until I think they revised our duties, and now they've done so. So my question would be, do we have anything to work on? If we had approved priorities by then it would probably be worth doing so. If we don't have approved priorities, then I'm not sure what we would meet about. So I guess, Mr. Noonan, do you mind updating us on that?
I think that we can get the priorities to the council before then, yes.
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
We can get the commission's priorities to the council before the March meeting.
Well, if they were approved, and maybe we could do the April, cancel one and have April, or maybe we could wait and see. I mean, at the point they're approved, personally, I'd be in favor of having one on the east side. I just sort of want to make sure we have something to talk about.
Any thoughts on a study session as well?
I will just throw in that most likely I will be out on the 9th.
I'm in agreement with Commissioner O'Keefe. If we have approved priorities, I'm happy to come and discuss some of these things and get some things checked off our list.
How about planning the 26th meeting for sure and see if it works out? And if it doesn't, then we will cancel the 9th.
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
Let's approve the March 26th and decide on the 9th that evening.
So would you be in favor of holding the meeting on the 26th, finding some of our action items that we've approved at a previous study session that council approves us discussing, the staff can firm that up for us? Is that what you're proposing for the 26th? And
Whatever the work is, I'm delighted to do it, but I think I would definitely approve the March 26th meeting. And then on that evening, if we feel that meeting at Fiesta Hall was successful, then we will have the 9th meeting. If not, we will not.
And would that be adequate notice if at the 26th we determined there was no quorum for the April 9th. Is that enough notice to the public?
I'm thinking that it might be better to do it the other way around, so that we have proper notice for AV and for staff, and so that we can have everything set up. I would prefer it if we were assuming the meeting was happening on the 9th and then cancel it on the 26th, rather than realizing that we will have the meeting off-site on the 26th, and then have to make sure that AV and everything else can be set up properly for the meeting.
I would agree with that.
So you're okay, we will schedule both meetings, we will re-approach them on the 26th as to the 9th. Do we need to hold a roll call vote, or just all in favor say aye? Okay.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go ahead and set those meetings up for
Thank you.
Fiesta Hall.
Item 11, public comments. I don't have any public speaker slips ups here, so no. Item 12, commission comments.
I want to thank staff for looking into that last item that we just discussed, and then also I had an opportunity to participate in the Beverly Hills homeless count last night with other members of the community over there, and I don't know, I guess we had a good time. I guess it's okay to have a good time out counting people without shelter to get the monies necessary to help our region. And then tonight, I think there are community members out right now as we speak, or getting ready to go out to count. So I want to thank all of them for their help in doing this. And after this meeting, assuming we get done early enough, which it looks like I will, I'm going to head over to Hollywood and participate in theirs.
I have one additional comment. West Hollywood and Beverly Hills are in discussions about the lodge that is on Robertson. If people don't know, that's a very important treatment facility for a lot of our residents and people who come into our city. If you have comments either way about how you feel about the property, it may disappear. So Beverly Hills is, or I don't know if they're inviting them, but we are suggesting comments be made that way. I think it's an important thing. I think we don't always tie treatment with homelessness and homelessness prevention, but a lot of people fall into homelessness because they have addiction problems. So as much as we can do to preserve treatment, I think it's important wherever those spaces are in our city, it plays a role in homelessness and homelessness prevention.
I just want to clarify, because I am 32 years sober. It is not a treatment center. It is a meeting space for where 12-step meetings take place, but it is not, there's no medical facilities, no psychologists, no treatment therapists. It is a building where meetings take place.
Yes, thank you for the clarification.
And just to tag onto something else you brought up earlier on, we don't have time to prepare for the Rent Stabilization Commission to attend the pop-up this Saturday at the park, but maybe if staff can try and find out if there's going to be another pop-up elsewhere in the city later in the year, so we have a little bit more notice to prepare. That would be I think it's a great idea. Commissioners, any further comments?
Just one, what time is the pop-up? 10 to 1?
10 to 1.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 13, staff comments. No comments?
I'll just say that if any commissioners want to drop by the pop-up, please do. It'll be me representing the Rent Stabilization and Housing Division, and I'd be more than happy if you would come and join me for a little while.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to adjourn to our next regular meeting of the Rent Stabilization Commission, held at 7 p.m., February 13th, 2020, in this West Hollywood Park Meeting Room Council Chambers.